I haven't lost the recordings, they just haven't been posted. All right, so welcome everybody to the dGov. This is our new interactive session that we suggested last week. So based on the suggestions from us, we have a new format we're going to try this week. And that's going to be talking about the practical examples that we have, but in a fun way, I just want to make sure it's recording, the fun way being that we're going to present what we're working on, and then somebody else will take our example and talk about the aspects of governance that will go with that example. So did you share the link?
I'm just making the document.
Okay, great. So then I think what would probably be also wise is that you share the link, and then let's say each person would explain their example, and then they'd write their own 2 or 3 lines about that example. And then we all go through all of it, and we all give an example. It could be something we're working on right now or something we invented spontaneously. Then we'll go through and randomly choose someone else's example to present. Okay, so my example is I've been working lately with someone, and we've been talking about the Amazon. And the Amazon is it's a rainforest, as well as the name of a company. And we're talking about 2 aspects. Actually, we're talking about more than, but the main aspects we're talking about is one aspect is going to be a dashboard. And the dashboard is going to be a visual that subscribers, which would be donors, maybe nonprofits, governments, will be able to subscribe to this dashboard. Probably have a picture of it lying around here somewhere, where they can see the health of either their acre of rainforest that they adopted or the whole rainforest. They would be able to see, the overall health, what's the threat index, how are the communities surrounding that rainforest doing, maybe the water quality, air quality, different types of indicators, biodiversity, things that are happening, aerial photographs, all kinds of things, so that they would be able to see that. It would be visual, just like how can you manage a commons if you don't see it? So that's one end. At the other end, the money that the donors and the NGOs and the governments would be producing would be used to create mutual credit currencies as a basically as the reserve. So you take $100 and you create a reserve for mutual credit currencies that could be used to revive the local economies, so that the people who live in the local towns nearby won't have to work for the oil companies and won't have to work for the logging companies. Instead, they can create renewable economies, they can do reforestation projects, whatever those funders are donating for, those could be done, create renewable farming, organic farming, and so that you'd have 2 aspects of this. One aspect is there's anybody in the world would be a governor of this commons called the rainforest, and the local people would need to be governors of themselves. And the big issue that I get concerned about is, how do you create effective action against that one corporation with a bulldozer and some machine guns? So that's kind of how I'm thinking. How do we govern ourselves in such a way that as a global community, together with a local community, we say, stop the bulldozers? Because that's really what's happening. It's not that the majority of the people want to take down the rainforest. It's that there's just a few, about 90% of the deforestation is illegal, actually. So that's my project. And I'm going to write a few words about it in the, I'm going to write in the document, and then I'm going to name Sid to talk about his project, because I know that he has a well-developed project. So he won't be on the spot too much.
Thanks. Well, this is a tough one. Okay, I can always talk about my project, but I will break it down because I feel like there's a lot of aspects to my project, and I will talk specifically about something we've developed called the Reputation Vault. we think in the distributed world or in distributed networks, there's a lot of emphasis on reputation currencies more than material currencies. And by that, I mean, for example, I showed up in this little get together organized by Grace, but I bump into Hidayat, who I know from a couple other contexts. And so when I come into this community, I'm not coming in on a blank slate. I'm not, I'm not a complete stranger. I'm actually carrying prior context with me. And I feel technology, especially agent-centric technology, is enabling these kinds of patterns. So in the current internet, when I sign up to a Facebook or an Instagram, I show up as a complete stranger, and then it's up to Mr. Zuckerberg to figure out how he can engage me and curate my feed and use algorithms to drive my engagement. But I think a good way to balance that is to actually offset that with something we're calling a reputation vault, which lets a user have
Sorry,
agency
reputation
over
what?
vault, like a VAULT.
Can you give me access to the document, Lauren, so that I can also write in my own words my project?
We don't have edit access. Yeah.
Yeah, currently it says view only for me.
Oops.
You may have to make it universally editable.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Google changed how they do this. View.
I love Google.
Okay, sorry, editor. Okay.
Say that louder so that it'll be picked up by the NSA. Oh, damn, we're using Zoom. I don't think they report to the NSA.
Stop changing the UI.
So the reputation vault is the answer, we think, to that problem, where a user has agency over their reputation across different apps and distributed networks. And when they enter a new distributed network, they are invited to place at stake reputation from other distributed networks. And so in doing so, they're basically carrying their context with them. And based on what they place at stake, it also colors their view within this new community. So basically, we think the money of the coming couple decades is going to be reputation. And so the reputation vault is this little cute wallet of sorts for agent-centric wealth. That's my project.
Can you say a little bit more about like a specific use case of that? Because that ended up a little bit vague.
So specific use cases, what we're seeing in, let's say Grace wants to start a community that's having nuanced conversations on economic and political systems in the world today. And she actually knows of a few other communities that are very relevant to what she's doing. And let's say, that's Lauren's community and it's Thomas's community. So she actually creates this new community and says, you know what, I'm going to allow members of Lauren's community and Thomas's community to come into my community and port their reputation. So from day one, they actually have a significantly higher reputation score in my community as well. And so they have greater visibility. They can start engaging with each other, and it's not up to me to start engaging them and curating their feed and pushing content at them. So you're not engaging with people on the internet as strangers. You actually see them across different contexts. Now, I might be a member of Lauren's community. I come into Grace's community and say, oh, great, that's relevant. Like, I am willing to place my Lauren reputation at stake in Grace's because I think there's congruency and I think I'll stand to benefit. But let's say Thomas's community is focused on sharing funny memes, and I think it's completely unrelated. I'm going to decline, and I'm not going to port my Thomas reputation into this community. And so this is a way in which reputation is interchanged, like it ripples across networks. And that's very critical because reputation can't be spent, but it can be staked. And so that's a property of reputation that we use for this. Does that example make sense? I can break it down even further, but yeah.
I understood that.
What's the circumstance where I would stake reputation?
Where you would stake reputation. So let's say I'm part of Lauren's community, and I'm heavily involved like in conversations around economics and politics. I'm a 5-star Lauren member or whatever. And Grace says, I'm creating my new community, which is very related. If you're willing to place at stake Lauren's reputation, your reputation score from Lauren's community, you get greater visibility from day one. So from day one in Grace's community, I'm a gold star user or a platinum star user. And so that's why I would stake it.
And staking usually implies that something's at risk. What's the risk?
So the risk here is when I consent to this, it colors my view of what I'm seeing within Grace's community. So if I decline, if I think there is relevance in this, I will see other members in this community with that, or with that lens. Does that make sense?
I think what you mean by
Yeah.
staking is like you'd lose reputation if you turn out to be a jerk or something. Is that what you mean by stake? Because I think that's the confusion here. Like, what do you mean by stake?
By stake, I'm saying, hey, I'm willing to expose more information to you, which may be relevant for you in this community as well. But yeah, what I do mean is if I'm an idiot in Grace's community, it doesn't necessarily go and affect my Lauren reputation. That's up to Lauren to decide. If Grace, if she now thinks reputation in Grace's community is also relevant, then she would ask us to port reputation back. That makes sense?
Can you explain it one more time? I'm sorry.
I think that
no.
Sid, I also think
yeah.
that what's
Let's
really
have someone else
important-
explain it and
No,
see
but
if
I
we
think
get it.
I want Sid to explain it, but I want you to get, Sid, how difficult it's going to be for people to use your system, because we can't understand it and we're pretty deep into this technology.
Sorry,
Yes and no.
Sid, can you explain with the Uber and blah blah car? Always we were talking. I
Yeah.
think it is
Yeah,
much more easier.
And
It's
I think
much more easier. I think it's actually like the challenge is this is just so intellectual, right?
I think the challenge is that word stake means something different to you than what it means in the crypto community.
That's
Also,
probably it.
I have a friend who was working on this probably like 10 years ago, and his name for it was cosign.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that might be a better word for you to use if that's what it means, because that's a clearer, when you like cosign, that means that you really go in with someone, like you're actually risking something on their behalf, like you co-sign a loan and you're going to back them up. So I don't know if that's what it means, but maybe.
Yeah. And that's fully possible. The original applications for this are coming up in context called neighborhoods, and some of this is really happening in Holochain, where you're seeing really lightly held, like widgety apps, almost like little communities. And so as you're flipping from one app to another, it's really intuitive to carry your reputation with you, or to be asked to be carrying your reputation with you. I think it becomes a little intellectual and hard to grasp when you're thinking about apps in the traditional sense that we experience today, if that made any sense.
To me, it makes a lot of sense if you're talking about, let's say I work on the Elance platform and I want my Elance reputation and my LinkedIn reputation to influence one another. If I get 5 stars, right? If I get 5 stars on my Elance reputation, I want my LinkedIn to show that. So I want to carry reputation.
Yeah. So the ripple back, like for example, if I'm willing to carry my Grace, my Lauren reputation into Grace's community, it only affects Lauren's community if she decides to port that in as well. Like it doesn't like it wouldn't make sense for my behavior to go and affect Lauren's behavior. But because let's say, Grace, you're a community that's under.
Go back to LinkedIn and Elance because it's too confusing. Or, Facebook and LinkedIn, right? Those are both chat communities, right? So I have a chat community. I belong to the dGov community on LinkedIn, and I belong to the dGov community on Facebook. So I want my reputation to go back and forth, right? Is that a little more logical?
I'm consciously not talking about those examples because they actually aren't communities. Like there actually isn't any culture, that's dominant in them. And that's what we're seeing, a big shift in agent-centric platforms. You're seeing communities that have a very strong, specific culture. And so, for example, dGov is, I think, a great example of a community that has a specific culture. But let's say, just for a very, discussions purpose, like just for right now, let's assume Facebook and LinkedIn, right? Let's say Facebook has this reputation for not being a bot, something of that, something really crude. And LinkedIn allows me to import my not being a bot reputation. So when I pop into LinkedIn, I can say, yes, that I agree with that. And the trade-off there is if I consent to that stake, it means I will also, like for me, I will filter out people on the basis of their Facebook not a bot reputation. That makes sense? That's the trade-off for me. And that's because in agent-centric environments, I can actually, reputation is highly relative. Like you don't have universal snapshots. So I might not see someone as a bot, someone else like Grace might see someone as a bot because they share an experience with you in some other platform. Bit abstract, I know.
I'm clear about the sharing the reputation, but I'm not clear about what staking means. So I think I think that might be enough for the experiment we're doing today. Unless we all want to work with you on that, which I'm happy to do, to kind of make it clearer to us so you can make it clearer to other people. I don't know, maybe let's go thumbs up, let's keep talking about Sid's thing, or thumbs down, let's do the exercise and move around. I'm
kind of fascinated by Sid's thing because I think that's super important, and I think it is so
Can we just do thumbs up or thumbs down?
Sorry.
So yeah, thumbs up, we want to keep talking about Sid's thing. And all right, I think we're going to keep talking about this and help you get through it so you can explain it better. So let me try and get a clearer example just so that we're not talking about Lauren and Grace because that's just too weird. Like we're both women, it's nice, we're both, wonderful people. But let's talk about something that's topical for us. So let's say that I've been in a discussion room or a community, and in this community, I'm known as being really great with topics around cryptocurrencies, let's say. Okay, and then I want to go to another community which talks about decentralized technologies that aren't necessarily blockchains. Okay, so Holochain would be one, or IPFS, right? So I want to take my reputation because I've been working, this is actually relevant to me, right? I've been working in cryptocurrency for 3 years. Now I want to take my reputation with me. Now, what would the reputation look like? Is that a number? Is that what is that?
Yeah, so the way we modeled it is each community has the freedom to articulate reputation or propose a reputation design. Right, so you can't walk into any community with whatever reputation you like that proposal has to be initiated by the community founders or whoever's in charge or whoever's governing that community. So let's say you have this 5-star reputation in the cryptocurrency community. Now, let me break that down further. There's two aspects to reputation. There's reputation data and there's reputation scores. Okay, so reputation data might be things like the number of meetings you attended in the crypto community, the number of claps you've received, the number of blog posts and speeches and conversations you had, different metrics. Reputation score is a computation based on that data. So the crypto community would basically say, this is how we award badges, or this is how we award stars to people. Like if you've attended 50 meetings, you receive a badge or whatever, right? Now, when we're speaking about porting data, it's porting reputation, it's always at the data level. You don't want to port badges, you don't want to port stars, because data allows you to deal with much more complexity. I'll explain that. So let's say you showed up at the new holochain community, which is a very broad, has many broad discussions. They might go about their reputation design in multiple ways. Like they might say, let's have a crypto reputation, let's have an IPFS reputation, let's have, agent centricity reputation. Or they might just say, let's just have an overall distributed intelligence reputation. And they might say, well, crypto reputation is 10% of distributed reputation. And so, when you show up in the holochain community, they might say, Grace, would you like to port your crypto community into this one? And if you consent, from day one, you've got maybe 2 stars in the holochain community. And so you're noticeable and you can actually start engaging with people. Now, because you've consented, you also see other members on the basis of their crypto reputation. So let's say Sid has been an idiot in the crypto community and has actually no reputation, you'll actually see him as a 0 star. Let's say Sid has been a star, a great person in the crypto community, you'll see that reflect here because you think it's relevant. Does that make sense? And so that's so the reputation vault basically holds those consent tokens, which allow that computation in the new community to happen.
So will this be graded on like purely, is the stars a real kind of like part of the wallet or score that you'll see?
So that's a great question. And I think a lot of people make this mistake of emphasizing reputation scores, which is the badges and the medals and the stars and the percentiles or whatever. The reputation vault doesn't hold any of that, and I think that's a fallacy because
Girls, I'm in a meeting. No,
we're carrying over our crypto thinking
it's
into
too
reputation.
loud. I'm in a
We're carrying over crypto reputation into crypto thinking into reputation. But instead, what we want to do is play with the reputation data. So in the holochain community, all I care about is how many meetings has Grace attended, how many claps she's received, how many blogs she's posted. I don't care about the way the crypto communities design their medals and badges, right? Like that means nothing to me. So
no, I understand that. I just think from the user perspective, right, showing Grace as 2 stars, for example, doesn't communicate to me that she's only got a like subspecialty of my new community. It would communicate that she's low quality in some way, because that's typically how we see stars and like 1 through 5 ratings in apps. It's based on quality versus giving it to the user or presenting it to the user to say, like, your community cares about these 10 things. The data suggests that Grace is very strong in 4 of those 10 things. It's probably important for helping me understand, okay, if I want to talk about, item 6, maybe Grace isn't the right person to talk to for my community. But if I want to talk about items 1 through 4, where she's really a specialist, I should talk to her, versus I completely miss that if I saw like 2 stars. I'd think like, I'm going to look for a 5-star person.
Yeah.
Even though grace might be perfect for some discussion or some aspect I'm trying to address.
I wonder to what extent this reinforces the sort of the fallacy of argument from authority that people with lots of stars must know what they're talking about, rather than looking at the validity of what they're actually saying.
Yeah.
I mean, how many Bitcoiners would come in and take a dump all over Ethereum because it isn't Bitcoin? And they've gotten, look all the stars they've got. They must know what they're talking about.
Yeah. But I think sorry, go ahead.
So Arthur and I actually, the first time I met him, we authored a document together at the Rebooting of Trust, and we called it Reputation Interpretation.
You and who?
Arthur Brock.
Oh.
So from Holochain. That's how I ended up with the job. He's like, you can really write. I'm like, yeah. He's like, we have something for you. So, but basically, you already said this. You said, when I come into a community, the community gets to decide how they're going to rate me. So if I'm a community manager, I'm going to have an attendance rating, whether you show up on time, or if I'm from, some country where showing up on time isn't important, I'm not going to have that rating because I don't care. In this country, it's fine. We show up 10 minutes late.
Or you'll design punctuality more as a spectrum, like a sliding scale rather than a binary. Like that's
or I just don't care, whatever it is. Like I might not care about that in my community. I'll show how many minutes you participated and how many thumbs ups you got, which would just show your popularity. And I might show, your, whatever it is I want to show about you, how many people responded to you, whatever it is I want to show. And then maybe in that community, I have some kind of grading system. If it's a university, I have a grading system and I give you an A, B, C, or D. And so you're saying, now, if I'm the community owner, I get to decide that. I'm going to say a second thing. If I'm the community owner, I get to decide how to interpret somebody else's community. So if I'm accepting somebody and say they have, they came from Harvard and they got these grades at Harvard and, whatever, they participated in all their class, there's an attendance rating, it took them 4 years and not 5 years, whatever it is, right? I get to interpret that my way too and give them whatever rating in my community would be associated with my algorithm that I run on them. And I'll say, you know what? 4 stars at Uber isn't the same as 4 stars at whatever it is, rideshare.com. And I can decide that myself as the community manager and I'm not calling that staking. I'm calling that I do a translation on my end as the community owner, that if you were part of the cryptocurrency community and I look at it, I'm like, oh, that's a Bitcoiner, but an Ethereum gets more points than a Bitcoiner does, because that's my orientation. But like I might say, the same thing. I might say, if you're from Harvard, probably you're a bit of a snob, and I'm going to downgrade you. But I, as the community manager, get to do the interpretation of somebody's vault. Rather than it's not like staking. It's like I create an algorithm that when you come into my community, from that community, there's an interface that says, I'm onboarding you with this reputation based on these credentials. And if you don't show me your credentials, you could show part of the credentials, but not all the credentials. I'm like, that's funny. They showed me some credentials from Harvard,
like the
but not the attendance.
But not the,
they're like hiding something from me. Why are they went to Harvard, but they're hiding 1 semester's grades. So I could do my interpretation algorithm however I want in importing you. So it's not my subjective staking. I'm going to stake some reputation, but it's actually the owner of the community or the community itself generates their algorithm for understanding. And we do that all the time, right? If somebody sends me a resume, I look at somebody's LinkedIn profile. Go ahead, Hidayat. I'm done. Wow.
Actually, I have a question. I think it can help to make the thing much more clear. The topic that since also the agent-centric, we have a different culture. It means if you are a farmer, it doesn't make sense to transfer your reputation to engineers. If you are a dentist, what do you want to transfer as a reputation to the artist? I think Sid maybe can answer this one, or especially Sid in the holochain community, when he's thinking about the agent-centric, it means that one. Just imagine, it means base and target supposed to be in the same culture. You cannot say, I can transfer my reputation from one word to another word. That does not make sense. What do I mean? It means, solid example, Uber, right now, because based on the centralized application, we see Uber just one community because it is central database, If somebody rate me 4 is centralized all around the world. I go as an Uber driver, everybody see 4, Let's go back to the agent-centric in one application, Uber. In Uber, when I go to Germany, I would create a one DNA and one community. It means first, Uber as an application, as a culture, then community Uber inside Germany. Then I would receive 3 as an Uber driver inside the German community. If I would like to transfer this number 3 or any meaning, no matter, to Rome, Italy, maybe it worth 5. And it is the question, Sid, when you are talking about a state or this transformation of the reputation, also we need to come back to the agent-centric. It means, am I right? You are thinking about, first of all, the same culture and then a different community inside the same culture. Because I cannot, as a dentist, transfer the reputation from a dentist community to the driver community. What does it mean?
Yeah.
You need to have some logic in the middle for the transform, for meaning. Actually, it is a DNA, or DNA. If I'm gonna transfer a blood AB plus from my body to your body, I cannot be O plus. I need to be AB plus, and you are supposed to be AB plus, that we can transfer the blood. You know what? Can you?
I understand. Yeah, and so there's a. Okay,
I actually disagree with that.
let me add a couple
Go ahead,
points.
Sid, yeah.
Because I think there's just a lot to unpack. Like, I think the point about Harvard that you brought up, Grace, is interesting. Hidayat, the point you bring up about culture is extremely important. And I do think at some point of time, as we start unpacking this and releasing more of it to the community, like, there's a lot to unpack for each aspect. And so I don't want to try and dumb down answers, but I'm going to try and take a crack. So Hidayat, to your point, I think it is extremely important. And one of the rules for reputation is that it is highly contextual. The word that you're looking for is context, which is unlike exactly the examples, that you spoke about. So the way we establish contextuality is I like to think of it as a more distributed, decentralized way. Like, there can't be this universal data set which says no, dentists can't place at stake reputation in farmer communities. Like, that doesn't make sense. So instead, we thought it would be interesting to model it along the lines of the traditional economy. So in the traditional economy, we say we arrive at the right price due to supply and demand tension, right? Like, walk into a coffee shop, and if it's too expensive, you won't buy it. And that establishes the right price. Like, that signal establishes the right price. With contextuality, like, let's say I'm a farmer and I show up in a ride sharing community and they say, hey, would you like to place at stake, or would you like to port your farmer reputation into this driving community? I would think it's absurd. And so I would refuse to do it, because if I did consent, it would start affecting how I look at drivers within this community. And I don't want my drivers to be rated on the basis of their farmer community. So I would refuse that. And so in the long run, that tension between the people proposing and the people consenting or declining establishes contextuality. That's what we're saying. And so that's kind of like the arriving at the right price to supply demand tension in the traditional economy. Here we're doing it with between the person who's proposing and between the person who's consenting, and that establishes contextuality. So that there's a whole fascinating discussion on that aspect. There's going to be cases when people get it wrong, and they go, and so what are the side effects of it? And so there's a whole bunch of conversations we can have around that. Grace, to your point, I absolutely agree. I think Harvard is a great example. Like, if I were to, like, I think as humans, one of our tendencies is to work with reputation scores, like the badges. Like, oh, you're from Harvard, so you must be a douche. Like, that's, or you might be a brilliant person. Like, we swing between these binaries. But instead, I think the objective thing to do is, wow, if you're from Harvard, here are the 4 qualities, or here are the 4 data points that I would like to know about. Or, I think like these are skills or, aspects to your Harvard education that are important to my community. I'm willing to put that in. Like, maybe things like diligence, or maybe punctuality, or maybe just quant skills or schmoozing skills. I don't know. Like those might be data points that I want to put. And so when I'm designing the culture for my community, if I want to import it from other communities, I would be very objective about it and import at the level of reputation data. So I might like Harvard's punctuality design. And so I'd import the punctuality data, but I may not think Hidayat's community punctuality data is important. So I may not do that. So that's to answer your question, like, always work at reputation data and not at reputation scores is the summary of that conversation.
Right. Where I think the confusion is how you make what you're calling an agent. So one of the things that we do in agent-centric technology, sometimes we forget that an agent doesn't mean an individual.
Yes.
Like, any membrane could be an individual. It could be an agent. So you could say, here as a group, this is the dGov group, that's a membrane. That's an agent-centric thing. And the dGov group could decide that Ethereans are better than Bitcoiners, or Bitcoiners are better than Ethereans. And as a group, we decide that. And so but what Hidayat and you've been saying about this staking, the reason that staking is so bizarre for people is it's not how it happens in the natural world. That's not how market dynamics work. Market dynamics tend to be something that's money, that there is an exchange value, and reputation doesn't have exchange value, and that's why it's so confusing. What really does happen is what you describe. What really does happen is what you describe now is, as this community, we decide how to interpret that community's reputation. And so you as an individual don't decide what to submit. The community tells you what to submit. You submit that, and the community decides. So it's not staking, it's an application.
It's more porting. Like, we also use the word porting, like importing, exporting. Yes, but I also think there is an aspect of staking because there is a consequence involved. So me consenting to that stake affects how I engage with people in this new community. And I think there is merit in this discussion on should we use the word stake. And to be very honest, that is still completely open. Like, we have no, like the point of these conversations is for feedback exactly like this, to come back and say, this is confusing, or, why do you even want to have the word staking? And so, to be honest, very happy to drop it if it makes no sense to people. And we could go with things, terms like porting into communities. But what I'm trying to say is that there is that element of consequence, because if there isn't consequence to porting into a new community, like, people would just go about doing whatever they like, right? Like they wouldn't think about whether or not they should consent to port their reputation.
Yes, and I'm unclear about what you're talking about consequence.
So
you keep saying how I present myself, but again, go back to a real example, right? It might be I'm allowed to post if I say I'm an expert, and if I don't say I'm an expert, I'm not allowed to post. Now, let's say I say I'm an expert, I post, and I'm actually an idiot. Then what would the consequence be?
No, let's frame it this way. Like, let's say you actually, like, let's say dGov is willing to import reputation data from Harvard, right? And let's say Grace is this renowned scholar from Harvard. She's got a bunch of reputation data from there. And dGov says, Grace, if you're willing to import reputation data from Harvard, you get greater visibility in our ecosystem. Like, people discover you better, you show up on top of people's feeds better. And so there's this question for you, because if you consent to that stake, the consequence is you have access to a bunch of things, and it also colors how you see other people. Like, let's say you agree to agree to port your Harvard data into this community, you will now look at Hidayat as well with that lens. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't think staking is a typical word. You know, I think Grace, and it could just be this community, but I think Grace is correct that when I think of staking as like an Ethereum person, I think I'm putting at risk some sort of tokens or value. And if I violate the community trust or not do what I said I'm going to do, I lose those tokens, and thus there's a negative consequence always. Not like staking isn't usually cast in the terms of positive consequence, other than maybe
I have to agree that the tokens really feel like something that you pass around, and one token's like another token. You know, add two tokens to, one token plus one token equals two tokens, but one star meal plus another one star meal isn't a 2-star meal. And people do this all the time. Noam Chomsky had a reputation for linguistics, and then he traded that in for pontificate on foreign affairs. And people who agreed with what his conclusions thought, oh, what a brilliant guy he is, because people loved to be agreed with. That's just reinforcing old patterns of trying to tune into people who already agree with you, so you can feel good about yourself. So reputation to me feels like, in some ways, the opposite of a coin or a token, right? It's not transferable, translatable. People who think this so-and-so is great and wonderful and amazing. It's like, yeah, but I gotta make up my own mind. And then you don't have any, you don't have any sovereignty over my opinion of you. I have sovereignty over my opinion of you. You can't appeal that. You can appeal to me.
But what it is doing is you're constantly making engagement decisions on the basis of people placing their reputation at stake, right?
That's not how it works in the real
people's
world.
reputations at stake every time they open their mouth.
They're
not choosing.
That's how it works in the real world.
Yeah, and when you're talking about reputation data, I think you're talking a little bit more like credentials. I think that's different from reputation. I think we do make value judgments on people's credentials. Like, Grace might think Harvard people are jerks. I might think Harvard people are the greatest for whatever reason. That's the value judgment. The fact that they went to Harvard is just a credential, and that can play into reputation, kind of like Thomas was saying, based on my value judgment, and Grace can't change that, and I can't change her mind.
So just clarify the point that you're making.
So that, I think you're in some ways conflating reputation with credentialing data, right? And those to me are two separate things, because credentials are in some ways like a third party verified proof of having done something, versus reputation is a combination of credential plus value judgment from somebody else or some other community.
Yeah. I like that.
And I think what Thomas said is really That's profound, because the other thing that separates is it separates the person from what the last thing they said. And actually, if you think about participation in a group, you know, like somebody could have an off day, it never happens to me, or get triggered, never happens to me, and you know, so like we don't, and so that when you enter a new community, you want to bring some reputation. So even if you're a dentist and you go into the farmer community, you want to bring in your reputation as somebody who's cooperative and nice and has good, you know, good communication skills. But you know nothing about farming, so people might help you based on he's nice and he's a noob. And then as you say things and get better, you become less of a noob. So I think that for the transmission from one community to the other, that's only kind of when you enter that you need to show your credentials. And that's true, right? You go to a bar, you enter, you show your credentials. You don't have to show your credentials every time you buy a drink, just when you enter. So, but if you drink too much, the bartender won't give you another drink.
So it's not just about entering. You might be making contributions in one community, but I think it's critical that your reputation across like 5 other communities that this reputation is ported into also varies on the basis of that.
And they would have to have APIs. They would have to have an API that every time you do something in one community, it's listened to in the other community.
Yeah, and so that those linkages are basically what the reputation vault enables. And that's and I think that's really critical, because if we're encouraging forking, like let's say, again, coming back to this example of Grace has her own community and Lauren thinks, you know, I really like Grace's community, I'm a part of it, I'm going to actively contribute, but I want to make this little mutation to it because there's this little flavor or subculture that I want to create. It shouldn't, what's the word, cannibalize Grace's community, come at the cost of Grace's community. Like, people who are part of Grace's community and contributing there should also continue to benefit and earn scores in Lawrence community and vice versa. And so which is why it's not just about entering a community, but even on an ongoing basis, work done in one community can be captured across networks. And I think that's the beauty of reputation as a validation currency, because it's non-zero sum. But yeah.
Gus, man, you haven't said anything.
I'm in listening mode today. The stories that I have nothing to say about this, but I'm very curious and learning. Also true that I haven't followed the whole hour, but yeah.
All right, cool. Oh, we lost Bill and Warren on the Bill and Thomas on the hour. Yeah, I think that those are. Sorry, who is speaking? Go ahead.
Sorry, no, I was just saying this is good feedback.
Well, no, right now I'm thinking more about reputation decay, and if the reputation might decrease through time for members, kind of an oxidation process of reputation. How do you consider that? I mean, reputation is something that if you stay there in a community, and even if I stop making my work on that community and gaining or losing reputation, it will be kept, or is something that changed through time while doing nothing? And if so, how does this translate with the reputation that you expose to other communities? This is my thought. That I have questions.
Yeah. Tell me, I mean, I may have misunderstood, but just correct me if I have. I feel like what you're talking about is perishability, or you know, some people call it legacy. So, for example, if something like driving skills in a ride-sharing community, like if I have ride-sharing, if I'm rated a strong driver in a community, how many years is that valid, right? And I think that's left to each community to articulate and design, so they can have this perishability of sorts that kicks in. So maybe after 2 years, your rider ratings start, from 2 years ago, start perishing. And so that's community specific, if that makes sense.
Okay.
Was that what you were talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think that is highly subjective again, because each community, like a community of, I don't know, practitioners or scientists or doctors, might think that your reputation as a practitioner runs into decades, so you might want to honor those kinds of time periods. Whereas your reputation as a cutting edge comic or a meme creator might be just months. I don't know. That could be subjective.
The other thing I would
I know, because I must say the main reason what I'm quiet right now is because I recognize a totally different mindset in usage regarding mine about reputations. So because in my mindset, reputation could be about a domain or a community, for example, plus a specific skill. Okay, I have those two things that can force my reputation regarding a computational formula whatsoever. No, I consider those two parameters, and then I build up a reputation according to a formula. No, and from that paradigm, okay, again, it's a skill-based thing. If you have if you are living in a system which relies strongly on reputation, again, in my paradigm, it should kind of be constantly evaluated. I mean, if I am doing my work as project manager and I'm just doing it well, my reputation stays or could be exponentially increased at some point in which I'm real expertise, it won't increase that much. Okay. But if I suddenly stop working for the beginning, 1 day, 1 week, 1 month, 1 year, 10 years, I will expect that reputation also decrease, because I'm not showing there that I'm maintaining the expertise in that specific area. So I'm making my question from that point of view.
Yeah, and I think the answer to that is it's context specific, and I would say it would be up to the community to articulate that as per their use case. And I actually think like the success of the community or how well people adopt the reputation systems would be a function of how well they capture that. But yeah, I hear you. I think I do.
I mean, it's the same with skill, right? Like Gus was saying, right? If I haven't played basketball for a while, I'm not going to be as good. And also, if I'm a doctor and I haven't kept up my education and science is moving faster, then I'm also getting worse by not doing anything. So that is how it naturally works.
Yeah, I think though, like the perishability factor would differ, of course. Like I think if I'm a doctor and I go on a 12-month sabbatical, I think I can still come back and hit the ground running, I think. But as a I don't know, as a basketball player, it's probably much tougher, or definitely something which is much more cutting edge and fast flowing.
Well, you got to check out how many medical articles are published per day. A practicing doctor isn't using the best practices because he's not reading those. If I took a sabbatical for a year, I might end up a better doctor because I could read more of them. But again, you're right. It's community-based, and the communities have to decide. It's
community-based, and I think we've never really modeled reputation in a formal way, and I think that's why we're so bad at it. Because we've never had that formality sitting in distributed ledgers, right? And so, which is why no one's really even considered it to be important, or it's been so centralized or like managed by institutions, we kind of just go with whatever it is, and we're not actively thinking about it.
Well, I think that that the powers that be have been active in diffusing how reputation really works in the human mind and oversimplifying it. But we always use it. We use it all the time. It's constant. It's constant.
So are you saying the powers of, you cut out there, the powers of D?
The powers that be. It's something like, if you look at reputation on Facebook or LinkedIn, it's like likes, unlikes, happy, sad.
Uber. I think Uber is one of the suckiest reputation systems.
Google's more complicated and less transparent, so I don't want to. I don't understand it well enough. But if you just look at the behaviors that Facebook is encouraging with the kinds of reputation it has, they don't reflect the complexity of how people really have reputation.
So I can share some docs. Like, some of the things we've been working on are what we're seeing in agent-centric environments is we're moving from apps to neighborhoods. And sorry, this point is important because I think apps.
I don't understand what you mean by agent-centric environments. That's what I stopped you, because I want to understand what you mean when you say agent-centric environments.
This is gonna be long, and I need to leave. But I'm sorry to leave now.
I think we're gonna have to cut off the conversation too. But
if I were to sum it up in one sentence, I would say agent-centric environments move us from apps, which are specific tech and generic culture. They move us to generic tech and specific culture.
So I think
that's
that
the one sentence summary.
So I think that it'll be helpful, and I don't know, but the way that the agent-centric architecture is being designed is biomimicry. And so I think if you would think more about biomimicry than agent-centric, it'll be easier for you to imagine these things, because that's how the design of Holochain is going. It's biomimicry. And by thinking that this is a computing system instead of a biomimicry system, I think you're translating computational concepts rather than translating biological concepts, where Art and Zippy's vision is to translate biological concepts. And I think that, I think that will be, it'll be easier to think about. And whenever you ask Art, oh, how should we do this in architecture? He'll always go, well, how is it done in nature? How is it done in reality? And I think that may be why some of the things and some of the terminology that you're using is more difficult, because you're coming from that perspective, if it's a computing architecture rather than it's a biomimicry architecture.
So some of these, in that sense, have been modeled on, from my time in a community that was founded by Gandhi, and so there are these systems based on social fabric, which can be very communal and patriarchal. But I would say that's probably the best example of them running in nature. And so some of those principles were kind of led us to where we are. But I think the biggest point you've brought up is the connotations people hold around staking. I think that definitely needs a good conversation.
Yeah, and also that there's no scarcity of reputation. Right, so you don't be well, the other people should, one of the things you said was the other people, when somebody new comes in, how will that affect the other people's reputation? There is no scarcity of reputation.
Yeah, so it's sufficiency, not scarcity. It's not, I wouldn't say it's abundance. There is a trade-off beyond a point, but I think that there's sufficiency. If everyone in class got an A, then the grades would start losing their purpose beyond a point.
Yeah, the grades have no purpose.
You might want to create a grading system, right?
the grading system in a university that has
No, forget
graded.
the university. I'm just saying, just creating a grading system as a signal or an indicator of capacities in your community.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's say I taught a course. I'm just going to say taught a course, right? Because that's something they'll understand. You get a grade, and everybody got every question correct on the paper. Everybody showed up on time, and I had to call. Everybody raised their hand. I had to just take turns every time I asked somebody a question. Right? Not only should I give everybody an A, but I should give that teacher an A because that teacher's freaking amazing. I'd give the teacher an A in that case. Forget the class, right?
Agree.
So, but there's no shortage of ability. Right? The capacity in that community is very high.
So here's how I'd break that down. If the purpose of that class is almost binary, like all we need to do is make sure the kids are greater than this skill level, then I think it's fine. Like everyone got A's, that's fine. There's a very tangible skill level that they're above. But if the purpose of the class is, I actually need to create some kind of pecking order, because when people discover each other in the future, either through jobs or through social media feeds, I want to create this nuance and give some signal as to what's the difference between people and their capacities. And so in that case, I would say, I think the test may not have been appropriately designed. Like it could be a more nuanced test. I don't know.
If I want to create a competitive society,
I'm saying it. I'm treading very gently because I could be saying some very making some sweeping statements here. I think there's a lot.
But again, that's shortage mentality, and that is invented. That is manufactured scarcity, and that's the system that we live in today. We have artificial scarcity of things that there's no scarcity of. Living, growing systems always get more rich, more dense, more growing. That's the truth of nature. If we create artificial scarcity, then we create a false competition between people who could be helping each other because we're creating false scarcity.
I agree, and which is why I'm not talking about false scarcity.
You can create ranking systems. Ranking systems are different, right? So you can have everybody get an A in physical education at your school, but still have the fastest runner on the team. They're still the fastest runner. Everybody did enough exercise. Everybody got an A, but that's the fastest runner. There's no, again, so that there's still the capacity.
Yeah, so don't get me wrong.
System. Everybody's in good health, but that guy's fastest.
So don't get me wrong. I absolutely agree. Like scarcity systems do not work with reputation anyway, because it's a non-zero sum resource.
Right.
So there's, but I do think like sufficiency is what you think about. Like ranking still is a good signal. Like if you want to offer more insight.
Well, I mean, again, if you have a game, you want to have a leaderboard.
Like if that's the signals that you want to offer other people.
Yeah, and then if you're trying to create your League of Legends team, let's say I want to create my team for League of Legends, I need to have a pool of people who are good enough. One of them's the best.
Yeah.
That day, tomorrow maybe he's not the best, but I have this many people who are this good. I create my team of people, and from a pool of people who are all at good enough competency, maybe as a team, they're better if that one's a little, because that's how teams work, right? Not everybody's the exact level of competency. And then I create a team, and then there's still ranking. So that's natural systems, right? That's a normal, there is a ranking, but in systems where there's prizes and competitions, then there's the best, and it's not the best forever, it's the best today or under these conditions on this racetrack at this moment. There's all the people who qualify for the Olympics, and then there's the one who got the gold medal. So there's no conflict between competency and capacity and then still having ranking. Those are just two different things, and everybody understands the difference. And then everybody understands if you have this competency, you can be a programmer, and if you're the best, you're Vitalik. Like that's what it is.
It's hilarious. Wow, this was quite intense. Thank
Yeah.
you. I just like sleepily walked into the session.
And now you're awake, huh? All right. I'm
And
going to
now
go
I'm
to my
awake.
conference, I think. Lauren, do you want to say anything? You've been silent.
I know, but I must say I really appreciate you taking notes for these conversations.
Yeah. And politely listening to this.
Well, I would certainly say that it'd be really critical to have a really diverse group of people who would advise you on this. Like I think that designing for reputation, you're going to need people who are like autistic and sex workers, people who are like secretly gay or transsexual. These kind of people are going to be the ones who can give you the best feedback, because they're the people who are so adversely affected by our reputation systems of today. And what it sounds like to me is that you're creating an algorithm, and I'm sensitive to this because I go across communities where I don't want to I don't want to mix certain communities, and it's not because I have a bad reputation in another community. It's because it's just for certain reasons or whatever, that other identity doesn't really fit with this identity. Like I have my professional identity and this other identity, and never the two shall mix. And so it seems like the reputation, it really promotes people who are kind of bland and can all their communities flow together, like these people on Facebook who can mix all of their like their family and this, and it can all be together in a jumble, and they don't care because it's not so I was just reading about these gay men in Morocco who absolutely have to hide their identity. They couldn't import this reputation, even though they might have a good reputation in this community, and that would, while it doesn't like harm them, it kind of does.
So, as in, if you're a trusted member of a gay community, you may not be able to bring it into a professional context.
Yeah, something.
Even if you're
like
a really effective organizer of gay protests.
Yeah.
I would also say that what's really, really important, I would say in designing, what's more important than what it feels like to me, and I don't know your system well enough, but what it feels like to me is it's like very judgmental, and it's based on kind of the same assumptions that we have today is like, are you good enough? Which is, I'm really sensitive to, not because I can't like meet those conditions, but I've had a struggle with those things being too important and being like too like chasing the stars and the points and the GPA and stuff like that, to the point where it's like very harmful to my health. So okay, so one thing I was saying, it's really important. I think it's more important that across different systems where people are, that you identify like the real serious predators. That's really important. And that's more important than discovering someone who didn't do well in a certain community, like he failed to do something, or he dropped the ball over there. I think that's way more important, like stopping people who are consistent predators, like sexual predators, or like whatever. And these people might be popular in a community. They could be the leader of a community. But if you don't have a system, like, and we've talked about this a lot among women from the blockchain, is that if the reputation is based on popularity, these people they'll remain on top. Some of the competitors are super popular. So like what colleges have done is they run these systems where if you have an encounter with a predator, you can report it, but it remains like encapsulated. Your report remains encapsulated, so no one else can see it. But if there are like 3 or 4 complaints against someone, like people like saying they've been raped or something like that, it kind of like opens those capsules. So those, I guess it would usually be women, can actually like find out about each other. And so if something is alerted, something happens. And that is really important across communities, I think, that you stop that predation. But what I worry about is like just the fact that it seems like the premise is like comparing people and acting kind of like trying to figure out if they're worthy or not, instead of based on the premise that everyone is worthy, and how you handle them and how you deal with them in order to make them shine and make them an asset in your community, and how they kind of need to be, how you need to deal with them in order to bring out their best, which I think is really important. Because it seems to me that what you expect of someone, they will kind of deliver. Like, if you think that someone is stupid, they're going to usually be stupid. And that was kind of my experience in life. Like, my teachers thought I was stupid because I was shy and quiet. And then, you know, my mom took me to get my IQ test, and it's not like I was a genius or anything, but I certainly was a lot higher than what they were putting me in. And then as soon as I got put into advanced groups, then my scores on my test went up 30% in like 1 year. And those aren't supposed to change. They, you know, you know what I'm saying? So I think that there's something about humans that can absolutely be different in different communities where they receive different treatment and care. And
there's actually some
Thank you
interesting
for
studies
sharing.
on that. That's amazing.
Thank you for sharing, and I think you've brought up so many different aspects, like it probably warrants another conversation. I should also add 2 things real quick, because I know Grace has to go. One, I think if we don't develop a formal economic language, like we will end up with some of the dystopian situations getting amplified that you highlighted. And so I'd love to chat with you about that. And 2, I'm really glad you brought this up. Like, I think the vulnerability with which you brought it up made me reflect on, like, I feel like for some reason, there was this little tech bro in me that got triggered when I was asked to explain things today.
Tech
And
bro.
so I feel like I came at, like, my tone was a little tech bro-ish. That's something that just runs in my blood, I guess, and I have to be more conscious of it. And so hopefully, maybe a conversation when I can be more aware of it would be more fruitful. I don't know.
Yeah, and I really think that when we think about reputation, biodiversity is a really important concept. Right? Some animals need claws, some animals need wings. It's not better or worse. Some animals eat shit. We need those animals that eat shit. That's really important. It's just like we really need to think about biodiversity and reputation, because there isn't better or worse in the context of biodiversity. There is, and it is a big rabbit hole. So awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks. Thank you.
That was totally not the topic of today, but it was,
That was
so awesome
totally
as
not,
usual.
I very genuinely walked in here thinking it would be a nice passive session for me where I'll just be able to watch. But it was so not that.
All right.
Sid, I have to say, I think that what would be super helpful, I think that
really, yeah, sorry.
Reputation is something that would be very, very helpful to get like an incredibly diverse group of people to weigh in on reputation, because I think that's what you're going to need. And that might be something that, you know, we've been working on how to have mass conversations and then parse those conversations into understandable memes. And that might be like a really good, because you do not want like especially like 5 white guys designing reputation, because that will be a disaster.
She's incapable of having that.
So I really think like inviting people, like the more marginalized people, is going to be super helpful.
Yeah, I think that will be helpful.
And so there is, so again, 2 things. One, I think the second half of 2020 is like, I really feel like COVID has just sparked off this thing in me, and I feel like it's time to pull some triggers in the second half of this year. And 2, I think like we're thinking about it, like in my head, there's this number of like 3 to 4 dozen like Genesis designers, and like I think seeding or having conversations with that kind of diversity that you speak of is critical. Because I mean, for me, what is this about, right? Like I'm sick and tired of this monolithic culture that, you know, that we're all enforced to live under and interact with each other under. And so for me, this is about like regenerating diversity, like honestly, like the Indian in me is just like tired of like uh of monolithicism, if there's such a thing. Like I thrive on heterogeneity, so that's what it is for me, and so I really need to live up to that.
Yeah, and I do think there's going to be different systems, and so this is going to be amazing. All right, thanks guys so much for another amazing
yeah.
All right.
Side note, Grace, I was gonna write you an email, but maybe I should. There was this little topic you brought up.
I'm just going to stop recording right now.